Hi folks, and welcome back to Mask Off. I'm Dennis TPUSA, and today we're diving straight into one of the darkest psychological spirals I've ever seen online. Candace Owens' fixation on controlling the narrative around the murder of her so-called best friend, Charlie Kirk. From the moment Charlie was assassinated, Candace treated his death not with grief, but with opportunism, turning it into a springboard for speculation, paranoia, and a storyline that becomes more unhinged by the day. Under the guise of just asking questions, Candace has spent months pushing conspiracies that actively undermine the investigation being handled by Utah police and the FBI, while casting suspicion on the people closest to Charlie, including his wife, his colleagues at Turning Point, and even figures inside the United States government, including President Trump himself. Candace has repeatedly insinuated hidden plots, internal betrayals, and shadowy motives, each claim designed to pull her audience deeper into a drama she alone claims to understand. So get ready, folks, because today we're breaking down the dark psychology behind this entire theatrical performance that Candace is giving us online, a pattern we see across the internet where certain personalities, often women but not exclusively, turn gossip into a revenue stream by hooking audiences on manufactured mystery. Candace has taken that playbook to an extreme, weaponizing doubt, positioning herself as a lone truth teller, and manipulating her largely female audience into treating tragedy as entertainment and conjecture as some sort of revelation. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what Candace is doing, but why she's doing it, and how this behavior is actively destabilizing the conservative movement from the inside out, while placing Candace squarely at the center of the chaos she chooses to create.
I'm going to miss Charlie going on dates and the girls they liked, and me always being the wing woman, and him asking. This text message is one of my favorite text messages between me and Charlie when he was getting ready to go on a date, and he didn't date many people, and he was just kind of in love with this girl, and he was asking me, should I wear this? And this is the text message. It's so sweet. He said, do I have to change this shirt? And I wrote back, yes, and throw it away if you can. Charlie. And he writes,
I think it goes without saying that this behavior is absolutely unhinged, and I don't use that word lightly. In psychology, this is often described as a violation of posthumous relational boundaries, the exploitation of private communications after someone's death for personal gain. Most people wouldn't do this to an enemy, by the way. Yet here we have Candace Owens, someone who branded herself as Charlie Kirk's best friend, releasing intimate text messages before his family has even begun to process their loss. His widow is still grieving. His children are still trying to understand why their father isn't coming home. Meanwhile, Candace is strip-feeding private conversations to millions as if she's promoting a mid-season cliffhanger. That alone signals something deeply pathological going on here. The pleasure she takes in recounting Charlie's insecurities, the nostalgic giggle in her tone, the way she frames herself as the wise, guiding figure in Charlie's personal life. These behaviors align with what researchers often describe as narcissistic exploitation of shared emotional material. This is not grief, folks. This is pure consumption. And the timing matters as well. You have to ask yourselves why none of this was ever shared publicly before. Why now? Why exactly 3 months after Candace accused Nick Fuentes of grifting off Charlie's death? Why suddenly pivot to stories about Charlie being in love with another woman? Why weaponize memories that in any sane world would be offered privately to comfort the widow, not broadcast online to humiliate her? The answer follows a well-documented pattern in manipulation psychology. Control the narrative, you control the audience. Maintaining control over Charlie's story allows Candace to maintain psychological control over her followers. She becomes the interpreter of their grief, the keeper of secrets, the gatekeeper of what Charlie really felt. This is part of a dynamic in which a manipulator provides irregular doses of emotionally charged information to keep an audience dependent, attentive, and emotionally bonded. It's not about honoring Charlie, it's about tethering the audience to her perspective of Charlie. But the deeper issue here is that Candace's behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. It fits perfectly within a broader cultural ecosystem where parasocial intimacy has replaced real relationships. Grief is commodified. Private life is raw material for monetized reality show type spectacle online. Audiences are drawn toward emotional narratives that simulate some sort of intimacy, even when those narratives violate normal moral boundaries. Candace exploits that vulnerability deliberately. She presents herself as Charlie's confidant, not to honor Charlie, but to bind her audience to her through secondhand emotional access. Politically and culturally, this dynamic reflects a trend reinforced across media, academia, and entertainment, the elevation of emotional narratives over empirical truths. In this environment, whoever delivers the strongest emotional hook becomes the authority figure. That's why Candace's audience accepts her behavior without recognizing the violation. They've been conditioned to prioritize drama over discernment and spectacle over any sort of substance. Notice how she injects suspicion into every corner of Charlie's world. His wife, his colleagues at Turning Point.
Like I just said, had a vivid dream this weekend, and Charlie came to me and he told me that he was betrayed. And so for me, you don't have to believe that, but I do believe that. And it was the immediate sense I got, actually. And I don't know who exactly it is that betrayed him, but I also felt in the dream that it is soon going to be revealed, that it's actually inevitable that it is going to be revealed, that there is nothing and no one that is going to stop the truth from coming out, and it is going to have international consequences. Take that to the bank. Quote me on that. Women tend to have a strong...
Needless to say, intuition isn't science. There's no level of investigation going on here. It's just straight up horse manure, to put it bluntly. And yet, this is the foundation of which Candace Owens is now constructing an entirely alternative narrative. She is claiming that Charlie Kirk appeared to her in a dream and told her that Tyler Robinson, the man who has already confessed and whose account aligns with physical evidence, isn't the killer. That is the basis of Candace's theory, not new facts, not new witness testimony, not forensic developments, a dream. This is not analysis, folks. It's mysticism turned into political commentary. But what's remarkable is not just that she said this, it's the confidence with which she delivers it. She insists Charlie came to her and told her he was betrayed. She acknowledges no responsibility to produce evidence. Instead, she instructs her audience to take that to the bank and quote me on that. What we're seeing here is a classic psychological maneuver. When a person has no empirical grounding, they shift to metaphysical authority. The dream becomes a rhetorical shield. It can't be questioned, it can't be disproven, and it positions her as the only person with privileged access to this truth. And this is where the psychological pattern becomes undeniable. What she is doing is a form of narrative possession, taking ownership of Charlie's death, Charlie's voice, and now Charlie's supposed posthumous revelations. The moment she claims he spoke to her, she elevates herself above earthly institution, above the police, above the FBI, above the forensic record, above Charlie's own widow. She is effectively saying, I have a direct line to the victim himself. That is a profoundly manipulative framing because it bypasses rational scrutiny and reroutes the audience's trust through a spiritual fantasy that she alone controls to her own self-serving benefit. This taps directly into the broader cultural crisis that we're currently living in, the replacement of epistemic authority for a personal revelation. We now inhabit an era where subjective feeling is treated as superior to objective fact, a trend accelerated by influencer culture, online tribalism, and the decline of trust in everyday institutions. So when Candace claims that Charlie visited her in a dream to expose a conspiracy with international consequences, she is not just indulging in delusions, she is weaponizing a cultural moment in which personal narratives are seen as more authentic than evidence itself. Now, there is also a dangerous parasocial component here. Her followers don't know Charlie. They don't know the investigators, but they do know her. They trust her voice. And in that environment, a dream can function like scripture. By invoking a dream, she effectively canonizes herself as the interpreter of Charlie's will, the arbiter of his final message, the vessel through which his truth flows. It turns grief into mythology and tragedy into a recruitment tool. And this reveals something deeper about the current psychology around influencers. When an influencer begins to lose control of a narrative, they often escalate their claims in ways that cannot be verified but also cannot be easily challenged. Dreams, intuition, prophecy, I just have a feeling. These forms of pseudo-revelation provide insulation. They allow the influencer to assert dominance without accountability. And they create a dynamic where contradicting the influencer isn't just disagreeing, it's rejecting the divine insight. But the most telling part is how she weaponizes gender in this moment. After delivering a prophetic monologue about betrayal, conspiracy, and international consequences, Candace pivots to women tend to have a strong intuition. This is not harmless, folks. It's a strategic tactic. She's reframing her dream not as a rational fantasy, but as feminine insight, a kind of mystical wisdom her audience should respect and relate to. That's emotional blackmail masquerading as empowerment. It pressures her largely female audience to validate her claim or risk feeling like they're betraying their own intuitive abilities.
How dare you question the ghost of Charlie Kirk? Are you suggesting that Charlie could have possibly not had good judgment? Am I suggesting that I've maybe watched a lot of hours of IDTV and it seems like, yeah, it's a kind of a common theme that when people die, you should question the people closest to them? Actually, yeah, I am suggesting that it's like a very high percentage of murders that are committed by somebody else that they know. I think it's like north of 95% of murders. And no matter how many adjectives you assign to people at Turning Point USA, we're not going to accept this narrative, okay? We're not going to accept this narrative, especially when you're lying and you won't tell us the relevant portions. Who did he think was going to kill him? Andrew Colvett? Can you tell us, Andrew? Can you tell us, Blake Neff? Can you tell us, Mikey McCoy?
This is just as brilliant as it is foolish because Candace has managed to create an ecosystem of disinformation where anything that gets discussed by Turning Point ends up becoming an inherent confirmation of her conspiracy theory and the exactitude of it. That's what she's doing here, folks. She is the one who created this narrative around Charlie texting the day before his murder that he was concerned about being assassinated, when in fact, as we'll show later on in this video, that is a complete lie and fabrication. And we know it's a fabrication because the people who actually have access to Charlie's cell phone have already debunked it. But that doesn't matter, folks, because in the world she's constructing, reality is determined by assertion. All you have to do is state whatever you want, and if the other side even acknowledges the statement existed, that acknowledgement alone becomes proof that the claim is true. And then they are expected to provide details for something that never happened in the first place, a logical trap they can never escape because the information they're being asked to explain isn't even real to begin with. And thus, she's applying this same method to this claim that Charlie was murdered by his closest friends because she watches a lot of true crime documentaries, and according to her, 95% of murders are committed by someone the victim knows. That's not a statistic, folks. That's a plot device. In reality, criminology data shows the majority of homicides involve acquaintances or intimate partners, but nowhere near the 95% figure she throws out. Candace isn't even citing data. She's just citing the emotional impressions she's absorbed from hours of IDTV. She's taking entertainment tropes, the cheating spouse, the jealous friend, the coworker with a secret, and applying them as if they are investigative principles. This is influencer epistemology, folks. Feelings presented as facts, vibes presented as evidence, and television narratives replacing real-world forensic standards. All that said, the psychology at play here is beyond obvious. What Candace is doing is exploiting a cognitive bias known as availability heuristics, the tendency for people to believe that the most vivid or familiar stories reflect reality. In that framework, if you watch enough of a true crime series where the killer is always the husband or the coworker, then your brain learns to treat those patterns as universal. And Candace is leveraging that bias to manufacture suspicion around whoever she wants. It's not logic, folks. It's just pattern association dressed up as this low-level IQ analysis. It also taps into something much darker, her ability to turn unrelated information into a self-sustaining conspiracy loop. When she sarcastically says, "How dare you question the ghost of Charlie Kirk?" she is mocking any attempt to challenge her while simultaneously framing herself as someone who speaks with prophetic authority. She positions herself as the sole interpreter of Charlie's supposed final thoughts, and by ridiculing others for questioning her intuition, she's insulating herself against criticism. Anyone who pushes back is framed as either naive or complicit. So notice the rhetorical maneuver she uses. She lists people off from Turning Point, Andrew Colvett, Blake Neff, Mikey McCoy, not because she's presenting evidence against them, but because naming individuals creates emotional pressure. It implies guilt without evidence. It plants suspicion without foundation. It's a technique known as associative insinuation, where merely attaching a name to a question constructs the illusion of a link. She doesn't have to accuse them outright. The question does all the psychological work for her. And of course, there's also a political dimension to this too. The more Candace encourages her audience to distrust Turning Point, distrust Charlie's friend, distrust Erika Kirk, his widow, distrust law enforcement, distrust institutions, distrust anyone but her, the more she consolidates control over her audience's worldview. This is how ideological fragmentation happens, folks. This is how movements fracture. This is how influencers become cult leaders without ever using the word cult. They replace reality with narrative and treat contradiction as evidence of hidden truth. Now, Candace's strategy isn't accidental. It creates a closed feedback loop. She invents a claim, Turning Point denies it, and their denial becomes a proof of guilt. She asserts a statistic that isn't even real, and any challenge becomes an attack on her intuition. She names individuals without evidence, and their silence or pushback becomes evidence of a cover-up. It's elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its psychological effect. Anyway, all that being said, we start to see a pivot in Candace's behavior when she's asked by Turning Point to join them on a live stream so they can respond to every single one of her allegations and lies. And this is how Candace responded.
Let me see if I can make that work. Even if I could have made it work, which I couldn't have, because my husband instantly said, no, you cannot do this Monday. And he runs the household, and he has an important thing going on that day, which involves people that are coming in from overseas. But even if I could have made that work, I would not have within 24 hours have confirmed to them if they had even sent me an email. Because I have kids, I would have had organized things, and it would have just taken longer than 24 hours, and they knew that.
Now, there are a few different interesting dynamics going on here. One of them being Candace making excuses for why she can't appear on this live stream, blaming her husband and saying, almost letting it out, that he's going to meet members of the Qatari government. All of this is very interesting because Candace is very gung-ho. She's very proud, beating her chest as she goes out and makes these allegations. She presents herself as someone willing to confront anyone, expose anyone, anytime, any place, she says, and blow the whistle on anything, no matter the cost. Yet the moment she has the opportunity to truly speak to the people she's been calling out, the moment she can actually provide receipts to the organization she has been accusing of murder, conspiracy, and cover-ups, suddenly she can't make it. Suddenly her husband runs the household and he told her no. Suddenly there's an important thing involving people coming in from overseas. Suddenly she couldn't have made it even if she wanted to. So what we're watching is a classic pattern in influencer psychology, the collapse between performative courage and real-world accountability. Online, Candace is invincible. She's prophetic. She's authoritative. She's the woman who claims Charlie Kirk spoke to her in a dream. The woman accusing his closest friends and his wife of murder. The woman spinning international conspiracies as confidently as she reviews IDTV episodes. But the moment she has to appear in person, in a room where claims must be backed by evidence rather than bravado, her confidence evaporates, and like we see in many parasocial leaders, she shifts to an external barrier she can hide behind, in this case, her husband. Now, this tactic is very revealing. Blaming the husband allows her to save face while avoiding scrutiny. It reframes what is actually avoidance as obedience, what is actually fear as domestic hierarchy. It creates a shield against accountability because no one can argue with "my husband said no" without appearing disrespectful to her family. And yet it contradicts the persona she broadcasts online. The persona of the strong, fearless, self-directed female truth teller. You cannot be both the warrior who claims to expose international conspiracies and the wife who says, "Oh, I couldn't come because my husband wouldn't let me." The contradiction is psychologically significant because it exposes the gap between her constructed identity and her actual real-world behavior. But there's another layer, folks. Her mention of people coming in from overseas and what sounds like Qatari officials or business figures introduces a geopolitical undertone she never explains. It raises questions she strategically leaves unanswered. Is it real? Is it inflated? Is it another narrative flourish to make her absence sound important? This, by the way, is the same pattern we saw when she claimed Charlie Kirk visited her in a dream to reveal betrayal. When pressed for clarity, she supplies mystique instead of information. It's a rhetorical technique. Vagueness framed as significance. She creates an aura of importance without establishing anything concrete. And needless to say, psychologically, this serves a dual purpose. First, it elevates her status by implying she's tied into global affairs, high-level networks, and international dealings, all without saying anything verifiable. Second, it implies that Turning Point USA should consider themselves fortunate she even entertained the invitation at all. It recasts her refusal as a scheduling conflict, not a retreat from accountability. This is how influencers maintain narrative dominance. They convert absence into some weird form of superiority.
If you are saying that on the 15th, Erika Kirk, as you are insinuating that she's going to be there, right? She's directing this thing. Are you implying here that she's going to actually be in the chair and she's willing to allow me to bring things and to go over timelines and stuff? Like, can you make that offer through the proper channels? Can you actually say that, since you now have more details about how it's going to work, and reopen that offer again? There's no way in hell that George can make the 15th work. I just said it. No, he shut it down immediately, and for a very valid reason. And it is not my inclination to go to Phoenix without having my team with me. And my husband is very much a part of my team. But I will say that I will raise it further with the Supreme Court of George Farber. If you are insinuating, and actually if you can confirm that you are saying that you will allow me, as you said further in this, to bring whatever it is, because it would be more authentic if it was face to face. If you're saying that I don't have to deal with you and this is actually going to be very open and I can ask every question under the sun, I might beg. So I would love to hear from Turning Point USA, and stop pretending 24 hours was some demand that had to be met, because that's ridiculous. So ball very much back into your court.
I don't think the ball's in their court, Candace. I think the ball's still very much on your court. In fact, based on everything you've said up to this point, I'd actually call foul play. And that's the dynamic we need to examine here, because what Candace is doing in this exchange isn't just making excuses. She's constructing an entire psychological and rhetorical architecture designed to preserve her control over the narrative while appearing to relinquish it. It's a layered performance of conditional willingness. She's saying, I want to make this happen. I might beg. Let's make this work for the people. But every statement of openness is immediately followed by a new condition, a new stipulation, a new obstacle that conveniently keeps her from facing the people she has been accusing of murder. She's positioning herself as a reasonable party while ensuring the meeting can never realistically occur. This is a defensive maneuver cloaked as cooperation. She also reframes the power dynamics entirely by calling her husband the Supreme Court. She isn't just making a joke, she's creating an authority figure she can hide behind. Her husband becomes the immovable object, the external veto that prevents her from attending an in-person meeting. Psychologically, this achieves two things. It protects her ego from the vulnerability of saying, I don't want to go, and it reframes avoidance as loyalty or obedience rather than actual cowardice. She deflects responsibility not by denying the request, but by outsourcing the refusal to a higher domestic authority. This is a classic avoidance strategy. Remove the locus of accountability while maintaining the image of a willing participant. But then she complicates it even further by insisting that if Turning Point allows her to bring her team, her timelines, her materials, and if Erika Kirk is physically present in the room, then she might consider begging the Supreme Court for approval. Notice the structure. Every new condition gives her room to retreat. Every requirement makes the meeting more impossible, and simultaneously, every requirement reframes her as a person seeking transparency, authenticity, and truth. This is a psychological trap, folks. She sets the conditions so specifically that any refusal, even a logistical one, can be spun as suspicious. If Turning Point agrees, she wins because she has manufactured the appearance of control. If Turning Point disagrees, she also wins because she can claim they're hiding something. That's the brilliance and the foolishness of this disinformation ecosystem she's crafted. Every outcome reinforces her central theories. She never risks being wrong because she never enters a space where her claims can be challenged in real time. Needless to say, the emphasis on bringing my team and going over timelines is also revealing. This signals how deeply she relies on curated information environments. Influencers often operate in controlled spaces, edited videos, pre-selected documents, monologues delivered without interruption. In those spaces, They can frame everything exactly as they wish. An in-person meeting flips that dynamic. It introduces the risk of contradiction, correction, and factual confrontation. And that is precisely what Candace's behavior suggests she fears most. So she inflates the logistical requirements until the meeting becomes more symbolic than real. Now, to take it further, culturally, this reflects the broader phenomenon of performative transparency, the illusion of openness without the substance. Politicians do it. Corporations do it. Influencers especially do it. Ask me anything. As long as it's on my channel, under my lighting, with my narrative frame, Candace's conditions aren't about truth. They're about control. They preserve her ability to dictate the terms of reality to her audience. And that audience, shaped by parasocial loyalty, interprets her hesitation as some form of righteousness because parasocial dynamics replace institutional trust with personal trust. Her followers view any demand for accountability as an attack, any scheduling issue as persecution, and any compromise as a trap. By presenting herself as someone doing her best, someone trying so hard to be reasonable, Candace, someone who will even beg her husband for approval in the name of the people, Candace transforms refusal into a bizarre inverted form of martyrdom.
Certainly didn't suspect Turning Point USA would be, as I believe, involved in a cover-up. And we can talk about what the motives are of that. They could be financial motives. It doesn't necessarily mean they were involved in plotting to kill him. And I've never said that. So in theory, Cam Higbee, who was laughing off the idea of an assassination attempt, is being paid by the very organization that just had its leader assassinated in broad daylight in front of the entire world. I find that to be interesting.
What we just watched is a perfect example of why Candace Owens will never attend one of these public meetings. She may even stop doing podcast appearances for a little bit while the heat is on her because there's so much video evidence, folks. I can't really even account for the hours of statements. There are literally months worth of footage of her contradicting herself, and now we're watching her avoid accountability for those very lies, those defamations, and those libelous statements in real time. She knows that the moment she's confronted by anyone who has receipts, the entire architecture of her narrative collapses. And so she retreats into safer environments, live streams she controls, audiences she has shaped, platforms where she can mute or block dissent. Now, what's remarkable and psychologically revealing is how quickly she shifts from bold accusation to retroactive denial. She told her audience very explicitly that Turning Point paid to have their leader assassinated. That's not a vague insinuation, folks. That's a direct assertion of motive, coordination, and financial involvement. But the second Russell Brand questions her on it, not even aggressively, just factually, she immediately says, "I never said that." This isn't a misunderstanding, folks. This is not bad memory. This is a form of gaslighting through revision, a psychological tactic in which an individual denies their own documented claims to destabilize the listener's confidence in their interpretation of reality. But here's a problem for Candace. Everything she says is recorded. This isn't 1983. She's not speaking into the void. She's speaking into an internet that catalogs, timestamps, and archives everything. And because her entire operation has unfolded on live streams and social platforms, we can pull up the clips within seconds. Her denial is disproven by her own words. By the clip we are watching, by the very clip we just watched a second ago, where she states plainly that Turning Point's leader was assassinated in broad daylight and then calls it interesting that someone laughing off the assassination is being paid by the very organization whose leader was allegedly killed. So what we're witnessing here is not just Candace's avoidance of accountability, it's a reflection of the entire influencer-driven culture that now dominates American politics. A culture where performance overrides principle, where narrative overrides evidence. And truth is whatever the most confident person can persuade their audience to believe in the moment.
Because I was the one who said I had the information about the French Foreign Legion being on the ground the day that Charlie was assassinated, and the feds have not reached out to me.
Huh?
So shouldn't that concern Erika? Shouldn't she be like, hey, why didn't you reach out to me and say, like, hey, I'd like that information if no one's reached out to you? Like, why is that not happening? This is what I mean when I say that the reaction doesn't feel to the public as what we...
What do you mean?
And yeah, I'm generalizing here because there is such a thing as a general response what we would do in the same circumstance, like we would be like, whoa, even if I trusted the feds and I trusted my legal team and trusted their analysis that there was just one person involved, as soon as some podcaster was like, hey, I found Egyptian planes and they're being kind of shady, I would be like, whoa, that is weird.
You're weird.
What's up with these Egyptian planes?
Honestly, I can only imagine what people who are being parachuted into this situation think right now. Because when you hear Candace talk, she sounds legitimately insane. Yes, she's calm and collected. She looks all put together like $1,000,000, like she spent an hour in the makeup chair to look as composed and authoritative as possible. But everything she's saying sounds objectively out of this world. It doesn't sound grounded in reality at all, and that's the tension with Candace Owens, the presentation of competence masking the content of delusion. Here she is demanding to know why the Trump administration, the federal government, Erika Kirk, and essentially everyone in Charlie's orbit didn't reach out to Candace, a podcaster, to learn more about her theory involving the French Foreign Legion and Egyptian planes supposedly being connected to Charlie Kirk's assassination. She frames her lack of engagement as suspicious, as if the mere fact that no one followed up on her speculation is evidence of a cover-up. This is a classic logical fallacy, an appeal to ignorance. If they're not asking me questions, something must be wrong. But what she's actually revealing is a profound misunderstanding of how investigations work, and more importantly, a deep need to position herself as the indispensable center of this tragedy. Think about what she's implying here, that seasoned investigators, federal officials, and a grieving family should halt everything they're doing, ignore established evidence, and take direction from someone whose entire theory is based on vibes, a dream, cable TV crime tropes, and a now imagined geopolitical storyline involving French soldiers and Egyptian aircrafts. The reason nobody reached out to her is simple. Investigators follow evidence, not influencers. And her inability to grasp that reveals a narcissistic fantasy at the core of her worldview. The belief that her intuition, her feelings, her findings should command institutional attention. All that being said, folks, Candace is demonstrating a classic pattern seen in conspiratorial thinkers and personality-driven influencers. When institutions do not validate them, they interpret that as corruption rather than irrelevance. If the FBI doesn't call Candace, it's not because her theory is baseless, it's because the FBI is compromised. If Erika Kirk doesn't chase down Candace's claims, it's not because the story is absurd, it's because Erika must be hiding something. Candace's own lack of expertise becomes, in her own mind, proof of institutional failure. This is the same inversion of competence we're seeing across our digital culture. Those who know the least often speak with the most confidence, and those who should be quiet insist on being heard by everyone.
Okay, super fun show today. You're probably seeing the clips, but Erika has gone off on conspiracy theorists. Obviously, every journalist out there is emailing me because it's about me. It's indirect, but it's also about me. And don't worry, in case you think it's not about me, she is going to name check me on stage with Barry Weiss on Saturday. How do we know? Because our mommy sleuths be everywhere. And they recorded the town hall today. And as soon as the town hall concluded, we got a flutter of emails. And what she says about the Egyptian planes, I'm sorry, not gonna lie, it's a little suspicious. It's weird. It's a weird response. So look, we got to go there.
Now, I've watched this clip several times, folks, and it's actually quite a bit unsettling the more I watch it, primarily because Candace is smiling. She's giddy. She seems happy that she was mentioned by Erika Kirk. It's deeply disturbing because when you think about the reason why she was mentioned, the super fun show that Candace is referring to, it's talking about the assassination of a man. It's talking about a widow grieving, an organization unraveling, and the dismantling of everything that man built. And she's gloating about the fact that she's at the center of it. She's treating the fallout from Charlie's death as entertainment, as brand fuel, as a moment to shine. She's turning murder into a marketing opportunity. It's sick. It truly is sick. This is exactly where Candace's psychology becomes impossible to ignore, folks. She's demonstrating something that psychologists refer to as narcissistic reward circuitry, the pattern where attention, even negative attention, produces pleasure. Her excitement doesn't come from truth. It comes from relevance. The fact that Erika Kirk addressed conspiracy theorists publicly and that the media is emailing Candace is being processed as a victory, hurrah! In Candace's mind, being discussed is proof of importance, proof of insight, proof that she's the protagonist of the story. That's why her tone is so dissonant from the gravity of the subject. She's not responding to tragedy, she's responding to visibility. So notice the language. Candace says it's about me. It's indirect, but it's also about me. Don't worry, she's going to name check me. This is a psychological through line. The conversion of public tragedy into a personal storyline. She needs to be the star. She needs to be the one pulling the strings, uncovering the secrets, decoding the hidden truths. Even her followers are framed as extensions of her ego. Our mommy sleuths be everywhere. She's turning them into surveillance agents, a widely distributed psychological apparatus, and reinforces her centrality. It's the influencer version of a cult-like dynamic. The leader interprets reality, and the followers scour the world to confirm it. And look at how she frames the town hall clip, not as an event about justice, grief, or community healing, but as something we gotta go there on. As if this is a content pipeline, as if Charlie's assassination is an episode she gets to react to. This reveals a broader cultural sickness, the way social media has conditioned certain personalities to convert every event, even the most horrific, into material for monetization. There's no boundary between public tragedy and personal platform. Everything must become content. All that being said, this clip also exposes something deeper about Candace's relationship to the truth. She takes Erika Kirk's entirely reasonable comments about conspiracy theorists and twists them into confirmation of her own narrative. She treats criticism as validation. She treats pushback as evidence. This is a narcissistic inversion we discussed earlier. The inability to interpret external events outside the framework of personal significance. The world is a mirror, and everything it reflects must be about Candace. Now, as we discussed just a moment ago, Erika Kirk did respond to Candace indirectly, and here are both of her responses.
Do you think Charlie knew to some degree and had made the conscious choice that I may be taken out early, not saying he knew that day, but that he had any inkling that this might come his way and that he intentionally chose to move forward with faith in God?
It's interesting because I have unbelievable amounts of death threats. My kids have kidnapping threats, death threats. Our whole team has death threats. We knew that there was always going to be a threat, but Charlie and I we promised each other we would never live in fear. And he would say, if they're going to get me, they're going to get me. But he was not messaging people the day before saying, I'm going to be murdered. They're coming after me. Someone's going to kill me. He didn't say that. And I have his cell phone.
The podcaster Candace Owens, okay? At one time, a friend of Charlie's, at one time an employee of Turning Point. She has been one of the main peddlers of these conspiracies, and she is making a huge amount of money on it. She is building her business off of these lies. What do you want to say to her and the other people that are putting these lies out into the world right now?
Stop. That's it. That's all I have to say. Stop.
Needless to say, it's no surprise that Candace is lying. I don't think anybody's shocked at this point. The truly astonishing thing about this whole situation is just how much she's willing to debase herself in the pursuit of money. This is clearly for attention and profit. I don't see any other justification for it. And if you are genuinely deluded into believing that Candace Owens is actually seeking the truth, I'm sorry to tell you, bro. You're deluded. And I feel bad for you. I'm praying for you. I'm praying that you wake up because you are under a spell, a really unfortunate spell. This is magic. This is witchcraft of the worst kind. This is a witch's spell designed so she can profit off of you and destroy an organization at its most vulnerable moment. After the founding member, the face of the organization, was assassinated in the most brutal way imaginable, they're now forced to endure lie after lie after lie from people on the internet who are too eager to buy into fantasy. Because we've actually transcended reality TV culture, folks. We've reached a level of gossip, mindlessness, and mendacity where someone can sit in their home and lie for hours every single day into a microphone and build a wildly profitable career doing that. And so the real question becomes, how do we get here? How did a culture once grounded in truth allow itself to be ruled by spectacle? How much longer will we let personality override reality or allow entertainment to masquerade as evidence? And perhaps most importantly, what responsibility do you have as a citizen, as a viewer, as a participant in this public square to break that spell, to question what you consume, and to refuse to be seduced by the narratives that flatter your emotions at the expense of the truth? The only answer, folks, to all of those questions is God. God is the way, the truth, and the light. And don't be misled by these false prophets that cloak themselves in sheep's clothing, but are ready, like a lion, to eat your soul. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.